everyone, welcome to another episode of Scamfish presented by socialcatfish.com. Today we'll be speaking to Terri, who is from Charlotte, North Carolina. She is going to share her shocking story about a man she met on the dating app Zoosk. We appreciate all the support, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get into it.
All right, so I'm David, founder of Social Catfish.com, and
I'm Lenny, Senior Search Specialist for Social Catfish.
And today we're doing what's called a busted breakdown. We're gonna start doing these in our YouTube videos. We have worked really hard on these. We wanna show you how everything is done, how we uncover things here at socialcatfish.com. And we love your feedback. Leave a comment in the comment section below and let us know if you like these or not, and we'll take that in consideration when we make new videos. So tell us about your story, Terri, and how did it all start? What got you into online dating?
I married my husband when I was 17. I was married to him for 38 years, and he passed away unexpectedly of a massive heart attack.
What is that like, waking up to somebody every single day for all those years and then not having somebody, especially in the middle of a pandemic, and trying to figure out who you are and what the next steps are? I
was devastated. I had just talked to him on the phone an hour before. He was fine. He didn't say anything about that he didn't feel good. And an hour later, he was gone. He was sitting at a stoplight and died and sitting behind the wheel of the car. I was terrified because I've never been on my own. I went from my dad to him, and he did a lot for me. I worked, I made a living, and he took care of life. Just about the time that year came around, COVID was really big, and you couldn't go out anywhere, you couldn't socialize or mingle. So I thought, I'll just see what these dating apps are all about.
Terri met a man named William online. He claimed that he was a welder for the company ExxonMobil. He messaged her first on the dating app Zoosk and swept her off her feet with his words. They talked about having a future together, which made Terri feel like nothing could go wrong.
When was the first time he asked for money, and then how did that progress where you started giving him money?
Well, I had talked to him for about 6 weeks. He was supposedly in Greensboro doing a welding job, and he said it's millions of dollars, and I've got to go to Anchorage tonight and meet with the men and sign the contract and all that stuff. So when he got out there, he said there had been a storm, which I knew that they had said there had been a storm in the Gulf.
In the tropics, we now have Tropical Storm Laura.
He said, we don't have internet access out here. He said they're working on it, but we don't have it yet. I need you to be the go-between my business email and me. I just need you to screenshot emails that come in and then reply back what I tell you to reply back. I said, okay, cool. So I get on there, and there was a contract from Exxon, and it said they were to pay him 60% up front, which was $2.6 million. He said, what I'm going to need you to do is I'm going to give you my bank account information, my business account. He said, I need for you to transfer the money out of my bank account to Seaver Steel, who is who the pipes were coming from.
All right, so here's exactly what's going on. Terri was talking to this guy online. They started building a romantic relationship, and all of a sudden now he's on an oil rig and he's setting up this story for the future. So he is telling her that he doesn't have access to Wi-Fi and asking her to log in to his bank account. And he's doing this for a few reasons, right? He's setting up his future story. He wants her to see that he has money in there. And so if I was to go and tell you, say, hey, look, I have millions of dollars in my bank account, you may not believe me, especially if I met you 3 weeks ago, right? But if I come in and say, hey, look, log into my account, and then you see I have millions of dollars in my bank account, you're not gonna question as much. And also he's saying he doesn't have access to Wi-Fi, which is gonna build the future part of his story where things are hard to get a hold of or whatever the case be.
And the victim is feeling, I am so special, he's trusting me. And he's treating her like, you're the only one, baby, that can do this for me.
You're the only one.
They would not allow him to leave the platform to go to the mainland because they were assuming he was going to run off with their money. Well, then he said he found a captain that was willing to come and get him in the night and take him to the mainland. but that captain wanted $4,000. So I got $4,000. I went to that person's bank. I went to Wells Fargo here in my town and deposited it in that person's bank account.
Okay, did people come into the oil rig on a boat?
Most of them come via helicopters. Right. It's not impossible they come in on a boat, but they travel via helicopter because it's way faster, and you can transport people back and forth. And these are employees that are coming, they're staying on for 3 weeks. They have access back and forth. If there's an emergency, they can leave, the oil rig. They have game rooms, they have kitchens with chefs, they have their private quarters. They have everything they need to live a comfortable lifestyle on the oil rig.
And if something breaks down, are they going to stop all that?
No, there's too much money on that.
I don't think so. Yeah, it's round the clock 24/7.
Absolutely.
Finally, it came to the point that he said, we're leaving. I got a text message from what was supposed to be an attorney on Monday morning, and he said that he had been detained for breach of contract and that he was in jail. I said, where is he in jail at? And he said he's in jail in Jackson, Mississippi. The Jackson Police Department has him. I called the Jackson Police Department and I said, do you have a William Lloyd incarcerated there? They said, no, ma'am, we don't have anybody by that name. I texted the supposed attorney back and I said, I just called the Jackson Police Department. They don't have him. And he said, well, he's in Holden. He hasn't been processed yet.
He makes us sound like this is a secret, top secret mission, like Mission Impossible.
Right. So if it's a breach of contract that he left the boat, is it also a breach of contract that he didn't pay on time? I mean, where does the money fit into this?
If by any chance this is a contractor and he didn't fulfill his duties, it's a civil issue. You take him to court, you do whatever. This is how things work.
Well, but he's saying that he went directly from the rig right into jail.
Unless somebody's committed fraud, that would just never happen whatsoever.
Right. It would be tied up for months and months and months of some contract dispute.
And the way these big companies work, before they do business with contractors, they do their due diligence, So these people have to have licenses, they do their due diligence to make sure that they're not somebody that's just going to disappear, somebody that isn't hurting for money, or they're not their biggest client that way, that if something goes south, that they're going to do something dishonest. Right. And so they have big legal teams that do this and do their due diligence.
And they would check their assets, they would check their credit, they would check on a big scale.
So I called my son and I said, Jason, I said, if they arrest somebody, I said, do they put them in Holden until they book them and there's no record of them being there? He said, Mama, as soon as their foot crosses the threshold, they go into a database. He said, if there's somebody in that jail, they know it. That attorney texted me later that day and he said, it's going to be $9,500 to bond him out. I said, well, you're going to have to give me some time.
By this time, Terri had sent so much money she felt trapped. Every time she sent money to William, it was through Bitcoin.
And you had to put in more cash than what he needed because Bitcoin charges a fee, an astronomical fee. So if he wanted $2,500, I had to put $3,200 in the Bitcoin. Once they took their fees out, he would get $2,500. I didn't sleep all night. And at that point, I called my kids and I said, I'm in trouble. I need you guys to come to my house right now. Drop what you're doing and come to my house.
So another thing that happened in the story, Terri was contacted by somebody who claimed to be the attorney for this guy. And this guy says, look, he's been put in jail and you need to bail him out. So you do this all the time where people come to you and they have professionals they deal with. What are some ways that you verify somebody's license?
Well, there are websites out there. If you're looking for, if your hair cutter is licensed, then you can find that. You can find out if your doctor has a license. It's easy to do. You go to the state. If you don't find them there, they're not legitimate. In this case, this attorney was in Florida. So we looked up Florida State Bar Association. If he's not a member of the Florida Bar, then we know that he's not a legitimate attorney in Florida.
They were like, Mama, what is wrong? Are you sick? I said, no, I'm in trouble. I need y'all to come. So they came And of course, I was distraught, crying. I said, I've done something stupid. I've been scammed out of $27,000. I said, I've totally emptied my business account. I've totally emptied my savings account. I've maxed out a credit card. I am in so much trouble. Jason said, well, you're going to file a police report.
After talking to her son, who is a police officer, Terri filed a police report. When she asked what the officers could do, this is what she said.
As I told her, I said, I have documentation for everything. I've got account numbers, email addresses, Bitcoin numbers. I said, I documented everything. She said, I don't care. She said, there's nothing we can do to help you. You did it to yourself.
One of the reasons I think police have a hard time is because it's not really legwork.
Yeah.
And that's what they're used to doing is legwork. So someone comes in, they say, I've been scammed or my mother's been scammed. At least fill out a report. Because if you go and report to the FBI or to your individual state's attorney's office, that police report is a starting place for them too.
Yeah. The police, they don't have like real jurisdiction to really do anything because there's no real true crime that's being created, right? And it's difficult to, like you said, like do the legwork. Where FBI, FTC, they may look at like the bigger picture, like, hey, these accounts, these social media accounts, whatever, have stolen money from X amount of people over the years, right? And so there might be some breadcrumbs where they can look at being like, okay, well, these phone numbers, these emails, whatever, there's all this money being stolen, and then they can follow those breadcrumbs to see if there's anything else. But there's not always something they can do about it. So it's very difficult. Tell us, how did you cut things off with this person?
I had called all weekend. Every hour I called his number and I called the number that I had for William. That Monday he texted me and he said, do you love William? Are you in love with William? And I was like, I care about William. I care about his welfare. I said, but more than that, I care about my freaking money. I want my damn money back. I had texted both of them over the weekend and I said, you know what? I said, I've figured out what's happening. I said, and I hope that you and him and everybody like you end up in the hottest part of hell when you die. I said, because what you're doing to innocent women is ridiculous. I said, I don't know how you sleep at night. He said, you're mean. I said, you damn right I'm mean. I said, if somebody stole $27,000 from you, would you be nice about it? He said, don't contact me anymore. I said, dumbass, you contacted me first. I said, don't you contact me anymore. I said, and by the way, tell William that if I ever find him and he gets within arm's reach of me, I don't care about the money. I'm going to whoop his ass. So I said, you better hope I don't find out who he really is. I said, tell him to come back to Charlotte. I want him to come back to Charlotte. I said, I got 2 sons that would love to have a piece of him.
So we actually dug into some of the data that you sent over. We took a look at the bank account. And obviously it's a fake bank. You go there now and it's a blank page. I know you took screenshots. And we checked what's called Who Is History. So every website has to have registration on the website. When you first register it, and you can change the registration, you can sell it, you can do all these different things. And so you can check the historical data on this website registration, almost like a car registration. So the money that you sent was to Ilana. We did some due diligence and we found out this person's out of South Miami Beach, Florida. And we actually found a public record. Their employer was cited for like some health penalties. What you can do is you can go to Wells Fargo and you request them to freeze the account and they'll do an investigation on it. The next step you can take from there is you can write a letter to the bank and tell them, say, look, this is somebody that's known for doing fraud that is doing business with you guys, and you guys are supposed to be protecting me from fraud, and I'm requesting my money back. It doesn't always work, but you can do it and you can demand them pay your money back and see what they'll do from there. ExxonMobil. So before they hire any contractors, they have a legal department and they have a process for taking on new vendors. So we found out who the real people are.
William is not exactly who he says he is. We found that the scammer used 2 different men's photos in Terri's case. After looking, she noticed that the pictures were not the same man. We ran searches on both of the men's photos and found that the images were stolen. The real person in the first man's photos is a man named Craig. He is an entrepreneur, political activist, and civic philanthropist residing in both Washington State and California. The second man in the photos is who he claimed he really was. The real man's name is Jonathan. He is a private school teacher in the United Kingdom. The men in these photos are not the real scammer. Their images were used to dupe Terri out of $27,000.
Those are who the real people are. And unfortunately, their images were used, to dupe you.
To go back to the very beginning, I should have educated myself better on what potentially could happen. I still feel extremely stupid. I can't even think about it without, beating myself up about it.
And how are things been since then? So, now that you know what's going on, now that you have all this information, and then your children know.
They didn't speak to me for a couple of days. I mean, they were giving me the cold shoulder. I texted them a couple of days later and I said, I need to ask you guys a question. I said, if I were to get in a relationship with somebody and they were hitting me or they were being mean to me, would I be able to count on you guys to have my back more than you've had my back in this situation? I said, because y'all basically kicked me to the curb. I said, that I've only ever known your daddy. I raised y'all. I said, I'm your mom. And I said, y'all did some pretty stupid stuff when y'all were kids. I said, you wrecked cars. You tore up computers at school. One of you stuck a magnet to a hard drive and fried a computer that we had to pay for. I said, but did I holler and scream and jump up and down and stop speaking to y'all and give y'all the cold shoulder? I said, no. I came to those car wrecks and I said, that car can be replaced. You're what's important. I said, why do I deserve any less respect?
Well, it sounds like you have a good support system and a good family. I really appreciate you taking the time and telling your story today. Hope we were able to add some value to you with some of the information we found out. But I thank you for being on today, and just let us know if you need anything else. Okay, Terri?
All right. Thank you so much.
Nice chatting with you. Have a great evening.
Are you unsure if the person that you've been talking to online is real or fake? Maybe you've been trying to get a family member or friend come to terms and you have a story you'd like to share about a romance scam. If this is you, email us at sharemystory@socialcatfish.com. By allowing our audience to hear about your experiences, you can educate them on what you went through, the signs that you witnessed. Education really is the best way to prevent these scams. Your story could be the reason that thousands of these scams are prevented.
Thanks for watching another episode of Scamfish. See you guys next time.